Okay, folks, welcome back and thanks for joining me. In this section, we're going to build and deploy our two .NET apps, the Web MVC, on our tap run EKS cluster and the Web API onto our tap run AKS cluster. So if you'll recall here from this diagram, we're going to deploy a front-end Web MVC application with app layer included onto our tap run EKS cluster. And then the web API is going to be hosted on our backend tap run AKS cluster. Let's go over to the script then. Now the scripts that we'll be running are inside the tab/workloads/.NET/build folder. So that will be our intentions in this video to just create a build, create an image from our code and upload that to our container registry. So let's go ahead and talk about what's going on here. So you'll see that we're just setting some basic variable information here. This is the name of my weather app, and this is the GitHub URL. And I think it's important for us to go and see that as well. So this is in the NYC pivot account under the tap.net weather. So under the source folder, we'll see all of these different projects and so forth. So the Web MVC app is going to be this. The app layer that we saw in the diagram is going to be this. So logically, it's of the same tier. It's the front end tier. And then our weather API is going to be tap.net weather API. And some of these other projects are just shared, okay, such as this domain project, this domain. And then we finally have our backend database, but we're not talking about that yet. So back over in the script, you can scroll down here and see what's going on here. Now, I was going to showcase 3 ways of injecting secrets into our workload. Every application is going to communicate with something else, such as a database or a backend service, as exactly what we're doing. And there are different ways of doing that. How do we get those credentials to communicate with those backend services? But unfortunately, I won't be able to demonstrate the external secrets operator. You see, when our organization switched to a federated identity provider for logging into cloud accounts, a CloudGate in this case, the ESO or the external operator ceased to work for me anymore. I tried desperately to make this work, but to no avail, because it really is the best practice for handling secrets that our application code needs. But what is the external secrets operator? Well, it is a Kubernetes resource in our cluster that is responsible for polling an external secrets store. This might be something like AWS Secrets Manager, Azure Key Vault, or HashiCorp Vault. And it will pull those secrets and create a Kubernetes secret resource for us that our workload can use in order to connect to those external services that require authentication. And again, by far, in my opinion, it's the best practice for this very common scenario. An app needs to connect to a database, right? So it needs credentials in order to do so. And we can host those externally from our running environment. And the other benefit being that we don't accidentally push those credentials, secrets, passwords, tokens, whatever, to our Git repository available for anyone to see. Now, the other 2 examples for injecting the secrets are shown here. And the first and simplest way is probably just using environment variables. Okay, these are good for our basic generic data that our app needs. For example, in this case, a URL. Okay, so for our front-end web application, we need a URL to our back-end weather API. So I'm just going to go ahead and pass that into the pod, into the container via an environment variable. So this is not sensitive data that we really have to be too concerned about. So it's not necessary to keep it as a secret. However, the downside of using environment variables is that if it were to change, okay, we'd have to rebuild our container image. So let's say that we are using them for secrets and we need to rotate. Those secrets are rotated every so often, right? 3 months, 6 months. The image will need to be rebuilt, of course. Now, the second solution is what TAP calls service claims. It's close to the external secrets operator because the external secrets operator creates a Kubernetes secret for us. Here, we just have to create the secret ourselves manually. So TAP refers to these kinds of secrets as claims. Okay, there are two types of claims here. You can see class claim and a resource claim. We'll talk more about those later when we deploy the app after the build to our run clusters. So let's go back over to our diagram to get a picture of this visually. So here is our MVC app. This is what we're dealing with in this script only. Our MVC app needs to communicate with a backend web API. And so that is the URL that we're setting to an environment variable so that when we build this code, we will inject that URL into an environment variable our application code will be able to read. And then the other secrets will be for our application layer here to authenticate with Redis. Okay, it needs to have the connection details to the host where this Redis exists and inject that with the use of a Kubernetes secret. Okay, and the same thing over here, Tanzu observability or operations for apps. Okay, we'll need to have a token to authenticate with that service. And so we'll inject it as well as a Kubernetes secret.